If you don't understand how a union works, let me help you. You know, I was out of college. I was in California. I had my first job. A friend of mine said to me that, gee, you know, you're not making very much money working for that magazine. I was working for a grocery communications magazine. I was just out of journalism school, and I thought it was the most boring job in the world, you know, about how long you keep your tomatoes on the shelves and how often you send the beer back to Budweiser and all this kind of stuff. And it was boring. So my friend said, you know, I can get you a job. And a friend of mine runs the back lot at Paramount Studios. And I thought, oh, Paramount Studios, Hollywood. I knew nothing about movie making, nothing about Hollywood, nothing certainly about Paramount Studios. So I went over there, and it was a job called a film grip. So I was a film grip actually for about 3 years between like 1971 and 1974. And I worked on some films. And in order to work in that industry, I had to sign a bunch of forms, and I think I made a $10 payment to join IATSE Local 80. And here's a shout out to all the members of the IAT, the International Association of Theater and Stage Employees. And I love that union because as soon as I joined that union, and I was a low-level grip, which is like a movie, you know, laborer, right? I immediately had consistent work all the time. And there was a lot of movies being made at that period of time, and I had some great fun working on them, but it was also unbelievably good money. The funny story about the IATSE Local 8, I knew nothing about unions. I didn't even understand that later in my life, I would get a letter from them saying, oh, by the way, you have a pension fund. Do you want to cash it in or take it? Folks, I was so naive, I didn't even get that if you're in a union, the pension deposits are free. They don't come out of your pocket. Yes, you're paying union dues, but I had health and welfare. I had regular job security. I knew that if I went to the union hall, I was going to get work. It's a great system, especially for people that are lower end laborers trying to work their way into a career, whether it's the electrical union, the plumbing and heating contractors, the sheet metal workers. I've worked with a lot of different ones over the years. But let me tell you my story, which I think is a really sort of interesting story. I ended up in IATSE Local 80, by the way, and my daughter, 40 years later, ended up in IATSE Local 80. I can't say it very fast, but we both ended up in the same union. And how unions work is really simple. You know, you can't have like 10,000 electricians walking into some boss's office arguing about what their medical insurance is, what their pay rate is, how much goes in the pension fund, etc. So, you know, they elect people to be their business managers and the head of their unions. And so you have a negotiating team that's working for all these people that are out there hauling, you know, concrete or climbing up telephone poles. And so this collective sort of bargaining approach and having representation is super important because, again, I'm sure I wasn't the only completely ignorant 20-year-old. I had no idea what I should get paid. I had no idea that I was going to get medical insurance, which, you know, I got out of college at that time. I thought I would live forever. I had medical insurance when I had my first motorcycle crash in California. And guess what? The union medical insurance paid the bills. And I think that these techniques of sort of taking care of employees is really important because then all your employees need to worry about is getting their job done. They don't need to worry about, you know, how much I'm putting into my 401k plan or how much I'm paying for my medical insurance. So I love unions because unions help especially the trades. And unions are very helpful to people who start from the bottom and work their way up. And I will tell you, even my father, who's gone now, I can violate his privacy a little bit. He worked for a very large insurance company for a long period of time. He was a very loyal and successful employee of that insurance company. He spent his, 40 years from his 20s to his 60s making profits for them and making them more successful. And as a result, they paid him back by covering him with a pension plan that he didn't pay for. Now, again, employers pay a percentage per hour into the union pension fund, and it doesn't come out of the pockets of the workers, right? It comes out of the pocket of the employer, but it's negotiated by the union. So my dad retired, he had a pension for life, checks for life that he didn't pay for, free money. A pension from a union is called a defined benefit pension. It's not a contribution pension. A contribution pension is like a 401k or tax sheltered annuity for 403b for teachers. It's not like that. So you do have a union fund that you can put money into as well, but the union annuity, as they call it, is non-contributory. It's a defined benefit plan. So there was that. There's also the medical issue. When you're young, you don't think about this. However, guess what? When you're in your 20s and you're out of school and you're starting to work and young people are falling in love and starting families, this becomes very important very fast. And for people that are in the union, it gives them a tremendous amount of financial security, more than they can even picture, because having great medical insurance early in life for, family formation, that's for pregnancies and child rearing and kid visits. I've seen it in action, because if you've ever had children, it's only a process of how often you go to the doctor's visits, not whether you're going to go. It's tubes in their ears and it's teeth extractions and it's all kinds of things. And most unions have both health and dental and eyeglass coverage, and it's really total protection for the family. Now, in addition to that, unions usually have death benefits payable to a spouse. If a hardworking person that's in a union terribly gets hurt, I've seen this with the electrical contractors union. A client of ours got electrocuted working on a major project in the greater Boston area, and the union paid benefits to the spouse, survivorship benefits. So all of these things are sort of wrapped into the package. Now, unions are not for everybody. I would say that my dad did the work. He got to late in life. He got a pension check every month from the union that couldn't run out. When he passed away, my mother got a pension check from the union. And also, they covered him for workers' type insurance while you're working, and then Medicare supplement when he was later in life. So my father never spent 5 seconds worrying about whether he would have medical insurance. He could focus on his job. And then when he was in retirement, he could focus on his grandchildren and his family, because he knew that whatever wasn't paid by Medicare, the union Medicare supplement policy paid it. So he went through a long process of aging and having all the health issues related to aging, and got to the end of his life and did not become one of the people in America that have suffered from medical bill bankruptcy. The number one cause of bankruptcy in America is unpaid medical debt. And union membership is a huge solution for this. So there's no union member who pays his dues, right, which are pretty insignificant dues, and lives up to the union lifestyle that dies with medical debts for their family. So I really like the way they treated my father. The reason that I love unions, and I can say that I love unions because I also love my parents. And I will tell you, my parents did not become a burden for my brother and I, partially because of the great deal that they made with the union. They gave their work and their time and their effort over a number of years, and the union paid them back for that loyalty with great benefits. Now, there's a few jobs I'd like to just remind everybody, if you are in that category of talking to your children about launching their work life, or if you're a 20-something and you're about to go out into the workforce, don't avoid companies that have union opportunities. Now, unions are most commonly found in the trades, that's true, but also, educators have the same sort of union wrapper around their behavior. There's the famous railroad union, for anybody who works in like Amtrak and transportation. I do think that there are some unions that are more active than others. Certainly anyone in construction and contracting will run across the Teamsters Union, and the Teamsters have a lot of different union locals, right? And a lot of different skills. I actually was personally involved with some of the folks in the Crane Operators Union. They have a very powerful union, right? But, there are other occupations that are unionized that have union benefits that are not necessarily all highly skilled crane operators, right? In fact, most people that go into the trades can actually get access to a union just by being a startup laborer, right? So don't avoid unions when you're doing your long-term financial plans and your security plans. I love unions because not just the way that they took care of my family when my parents, when they were aging, right, they were also very helpful to me as a young man. So the story is that, I did this when I was in my 20s, and I have a book that I wrote about my own sort of experience of going from job to job over the years and doing what we call retirement early and often, the Rio system of working and getting vested in the pension and then doing another job and getting vested in the pension. Now, I ended up with 4 vested pension plans in my working life. And the first one I didn't even know. I didn't even know until they wrote me a letter 10 years later. After working at Paramount Studios and working in the local union, that I had money in the pension fund, and did I want to cash it out, or did I want to roll it over, or did I want to leave it there? And I have to tell you, ignorance is bliss. I was so dumb, I left it alone. And that's actually one of the best rules of saving, because I believe that union pension funds are like the old Irish joke. They say that money is like soap. The more you touch it, the smaller it gets. And if you're in a union, you don't get to touch your pension, so you don't shrink it. You're not taking money out of it, right? And money is put away by your employer. So I love unions, and I'm so happy to promote union membership for those people who fit it into their working life or into their retirement early and often program. So for more information about this, you can stay to the end and download our list of companies that have great unions and unions that have great benefits. And doing a little research before you get started on a career to get the most free money and great benefits, that's just part of the art of being smart.